The Shepnaz podcast begins now.
You're listening to the Shepnaz podcast. Here at Shepherd Church, everything we do here is to connect our community in a meaningful relationship with Christ. I'm Joe. I'm your host today. Each Sunday during our worship services, we like to showcase a ministry we support with our mission dollars. This past Sunday, we highlighted World Mission Broadcast. Today, we are blessed to have Brian Utter join us on the podcast. Brian serves as the global coordinator for World Mission Broadcast, amongst a host of other things that he does. Welcome, Brian, to the show.
It's great to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Now, you're not in any of our makeshift studios today. You are in your own place. So where are we talking to you from?
Actually, I'm based out of one of our Nazarene universities, Olivet Nazarene University. So I'm in Bourbonnais, Illinois, and I serve as well as a professor here and director of the media group on campus.
Nice. I know that we have a lot of things we can talk about, but we won't bore the listeners with all the tech stuff that you and I would like to talk about. We'll
Sure.
get to the nitty-gritty of who you are and the ministry that you're involved in. So tell me a little bit about Brian as a person, maybe a little bit about how you came to faith and kind of your journey in faith and personal life and things like that, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Probably the big starting point was when I was in kindergarten. I'm the oldest of three boys, and so I was the first to go to school. And my kindergarten teacher, of course, you have parent-teacher conferences. And my mom went. She probably didn't know how these things are supposed to go since it was her first. Instead of talking about my schoolwork, my mom shared with this kindergarten teacher all about the struggles in her life. My dad was an alcoholic and a workaholic, and my mom was raising three boys, 5, 3, and 1. And so she just unloaded on this kindergarten teacher. And this teacher did something that probably today, if a kindergartner teacher said this, they'd lose their job. She simply said to my mom, "Do you think maybe Jesus is the answer to your problems?" Wow. And that following Sunday, she took us three boys to church. My kindergartner teacher was a Nazarene pastor's wife, and that was our introduction into the church. And so my mom accepted Christ soon after. And us boys along the way. My father was resistant, but even a few years later, he came to faith and joined us and probably saved the nucleus of our family, that parent-teacher conference, honestly.
It's amazing to think that a teacher, and this was a public school?
This was a public school, yeah.
Wonderful. So a shout out to our teachers in our listening audience. This is the kind of impact that you can have, that one testimony can save an entire family. Amen. Yeah. So the family comes to Christ. Yeah.
So we grew up in the church. And of course, I remember accepting Christ. I was 7 years old. It was a revival. I remember doing basic Bible studies for kids with my pastor as a part of discipleship and being baptized. And when the church was open, we were there. My mom became the youth leader. My dad, he was there. He was really hesitant. My dad was a smoker, and so he never gave that up in those initial years and never joined the church because of that as well. But he was involved in the church and doing other things. My dad's a super quiet guy, which is the complete opposite of me. But he loves to do things with his hands. And so VBS design sets, he's all in. He can build you a train, no problem. Teenage years in the church, it wasn't until I went to Nazarene Youth Congress in Washington, D.C. in 1987. And that was when I really dedicated my life completely to Christ. If you want to call it sanctification, definitely I think that's that moment. But that began really my personal relationship. I think up to that point, I'm just kind of like riding the shirt tails of my mom more than anything.
Right.
And so I was a teenager at the time, graduated from college or high school, and left for college. I went to the university I'm currently working at, Olivet Nazarene, studied broadcast communications. In high school, my mom was a production director at the newspaper in town. And so I started working in media. I tell people when I was 9, I started in media distribution, which was delivering the afternoon newspaper route every day, So when I was 15, they started teaching me photography and developing pictures in a darkroom with chemicals. And I did some writing. I was a sports writer, and I did a monthly column that looked back, 5, 10, 15, 25, 50 years ago in the newspaper archives of what happened then, and wrote a monthly column that way. And so I thought I was going to go the journalism route. My senior year of high school, I took a media class. It was the first time my high school, which is just a small farming community, West Central Illinois. I took this media class. We did the student newspaper. That was right up my alley. But we also did some video work, VHS, and some stop animation stuff, which is kind of fun. But the local newspaper in town, or the local radio station in town, we have one radio station. It's a country radio station. And the morning show guy was also the high school band teacher, so we all knew him. And he came into that media class. He's like, "Hey, we're looking for part-time help. If anyone's interested in doing an audition, we're going to be doing auditions on Saturday. Come on down." So several of us went down. We did auditions. I thought mine was just horrible because I could not say the word precipitation to save my life. I stumbled over it several times, and I finally said, "You know what? It's going to rain." And they liked my show. They said, "Hey, we want to hire you." This was like end of February of my senior year. And I'm like, "But I'm going to be going to college." "Well, you can stick around and work here." I'm like, no. So I didn't take the job, but it planted something in my mind of broadcasting. And so I didn't study journalism. I studied broadcast communications in college. And worked at the student run radio station at the time, and which is what I now teach and operate here, which is kind of weird. But graduated from college, engaged to my wife, and
now, did you guys meet in college at Olivet?
We met at college, yeah. Even though we were on the same district growing up, we did not know each other. I'm 3 years older than her, and so she probably didn't, have my attention when I was in high school at camps and that kind of stuff. So we did meet in college. So after graduation, I got married. Of course, she still had more college to do. So I was looking for a job, talking to radio stations, and really felt God impressed upon me. You need to prepare yourself for ministry. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? And you know how God, when he calls people, he doesn't give you the full picture. And so signed up and went to seminary, didn't know why, didn't feel called to be a pastor. My background was radio broadcasting. And so at seminary, before classes start, there's always this picnic that they have to introduce the new students. They get to know the current students and the faculty. And we were talking with Chuck Gailey, who was one of the missions professors there. He was a missionary in Swaziland, or Iswatu as it's called now, for many years. And he heard my background was in radio. And he's like, "Oh, have you heard, that the church is now in Moscow, and they're planning Moscow First Church. And they've acquired a building that has several floors, and they're going to put a studio on one of these floors, and they're going to produce Russian radio programs." And I describe it as a Holy Spirit shove in the back. Said, "Oh, that's it." And so I then focused my studies at seminary to study missiology, missions. And so I did that missions degree. I was ready to go, the mission field at that point. And at least I thought that. And I realized now, looking back on it, yeah, you're no way ready. And of course, the church also knows that when you're, young. So they said, you need to get ordained. And again, I'm like, well, I'm not really a pastor. They said, "But you need to get ordained." I'm like, well, okay. So we moved back to Illinois, and I became on staff at a church, and I got a full-time job in radio because that was really what I wanted to continue doing. And I did that for 7 years, and just waited on the church to call me. And finally they did. And they said, hey, we have an interest in someone that knows radio broadcasting in South America and in Africa. And so I met with both regional directors at the time, and I'm not sure how they decided who got us, but South America said, we want you to come. And so I moved my family. My oldest son, Jake, was 2 years old when we moved to South America and took over the radio ministry there. So
next weekend is Memorial Day weekend, and on Sunday, we will honor the families of those who have lost a loved one this year. This year, we have 18 new pavers going in the prayer garden in their memory. That will be between services at 10:30. Registration is still open for school-age summer camp. This is every workday, all day, all summer. At our camp, every activity is a chance to learn, grow, and have fun. Whether it's scoring a goal in soccer, setting off a rocket, or making new friends, your child will enjoy an awesome experience here. They will get a chance to pursue new interests, plus we'll be focusing on how we can use the armor of God to stand firm in our faith while living in this world. Register on the Little Lambs website.
So you get to South America,
yep,
and you're involved in the radio broadcast there. So what kind of content is this? This is getting into what the World Mission Broadcast is.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us a little bit about the history of that and what it was that you were working on when you were in South America, what the World Mission Broadcast is?
Sure. So the whole radio ministry in the Church of the Nazarene started in 1944 as the Nazarene Radio League. And it was a few years after that what would be Nazarene Missions International today saw the need for radio to be used globally. And so they are the ones that really kind of pushed it globally and started, that's why we have the offering as a part of missions, was because of NMI kind of giving birth to it and pushing it globally. In 1952, because of that, they started the Nazarene Hour, La Hora Nazarena, in Spanish. And then soon after it was translated and developed into Portuguese. It was an hour-long program. It was your typical preaching program. So they had music and then they had preaching. Over the years, it dwarfed as it needed to. It went to a half an hour and it was mainly just preaching. And then it went to a 15-minute, more devotional kind of thought. And then by the year 2000, it had run its course. And they decided to stop that. I stepped in 2001 and got to the mission field January of 2002. And so when I got there, my regional director says, I don't understand radio. I don't understand media. Just do something new, which is the best place to be because you're not inheriting something. Something's already served its purpose and done well. Right. And you can start from scratch. And so what does that look like? So I get there and I get to a communication center that had been in construction for about 7 years. It was a building that had no windows and doors and still needed a lot done to it to be finished. And they'd relied on working witness teams to come down and take care of that. So the first year I spent finishing the building, but also traveling and doing lots of research as to what does a traditional Latin American, how do they consume media? So from the listener perspective, the consumer perspective. And then I also was doing research of media outlets, radio stations, television stations. What kind of content are you looking for? And so from that research, then we developed strategy as the building is being completed. And we launched one program the first month. We did we launched several programs that first year, and they're ongoing daily features. From the research we found, we knew what people wanted, what their needs were. We had needs lists for every different audience. But from the media perspective, they said, we want things that are short, things that are practical, things that don't use the language of a church. So the preaching program's out the window. They don't want that. And so we want to give them what they want. And so So we did that. We looked first at target audiences versus just this general program. And we developed first a program for young adults where we got 4 young adults around a table and they had a conversation, and the conversation lasts 3 minutes. And it's about a specific thing that we have from our needs list. And we developed one for every day of the week, Monday through Friday. The first month, we did an entire week on abortion, and another week we did on homosexuality. I have no idea why we would decide on topics like that the first month out. That was insane to even do that, because the church doesn't like talking about those kinds of things. But I'll tell you that when we talk about those kinds of things, we receive the most contact from audiences. These are people that are struggling with those kinds of things. They've had an abortion and they're dealing with the pain of that afterwards, the psychological trauma, or someone who is even within the church who struggles, with homosexual thoughts. They're communicating to us. They would never communicate to their pastor or to the church, but they feel safe. They feel like we're safe. We're in another country. We're just an email address on a website that they found that we give them, right?
You're the one that's bringing it up. And I think maybe that's something that we miss sometimes when we're making communication from the church. We're afraid to talk about a particular subject because we think that we might offend, we might scare somebody off, we may lose them forever. They'll never come back if we say something they don't like. But there's those that are waiting saying, is it okay for me to talk about this? And they don't want to be the one to bring it up. So when you guys are being brave enough to bring it up, then yeah, we see people that would respond and say, well, here's somebody I can finally talk to about it, because they obviously are okay talking about it because they brought it up. So thank you so much for doing that.
You're welcome. Thank you. So we launched that one that month on 18 radio stations. They received it on a CD. The following month, we rolled out the rest of our features. One of them is called Mujer Valiosa, the Valued Woman. So it's a 2.5-minute Monday through Friday daily commentary just for ladies. And we saw in the research of Latin America that machismo is very much alive, where it's a male-dominated society, and that the woman is she doesn't feel like she has value. So that's why we called the program that. We wanted to communicate to her that she has value in society. She has value as a mother, as a wife, but more importantly, she values to God. And that program hit like nothing else. So just to speed this story up, in a short amount of time, within less than 18 months, we went from 18 radio stations to 1,500 radio stations in 24 countries. Beyond our region, because we were just South America region, we were across Latin America. We even Equatorial Guinea, which is a little tiny Spanish-speaking country in Africa, was getting a CD mailed to them. We during those years of growth, we also expanded and built a studio in Brazil, started producing these same programs in Portuguese. And beyond that, we had about 50 localized ministries on the continent where I was coaching them on how to produce quality programming, quality content to our indigenous languages, Quechua, Quechua, Aymara, Guarani, so that we were hitting the largest indigenous language populations of South America as well. After a few years and growth, we had a lot of radio stations. I'll tell you this, more than 50%, probably over 70% of the radio stations were secular radio stations. They were not Christian radio stations. The way we presented ourselves and the way I trained people to go in and take the demo into the radio station is that we have content that wants to better society, that wants to strengthen families and communities. And so radio stations were open to that. And because we didn't use the language of the church, but we still were very biblically based, and we worked in a way whereas one program, we were very talking socially. The next program, we were very talking biblically. And we created like this, I call it the wave, and went from day to day like that. So it was more, I guess, consumable to someone who isn't a believer in Christ yet. The whole purpose of this, pure evangelism.
Sure.
This is a tool that was designed not for the church, but for outside the church. Absolutely, it's discipling people within the church. But after a few years, a lot of these radio networks we were on also owned television stations, and they said, you guys need to do television. And we're like, well, television, I know the nuts and bolts of television. It's very expensive. It takes a lot more people, a lot more time. And so we have the facility in Argentina, and I have the staff and I have the equipment. Can we pull this off? So Mujer Valiosa was the most successful thing we've done. We turned Mujer Valiosa into a television show. And I figured out a way to produce a quality half hour of television for $300 US.
Wow.
An 18 episode season. And we launched, and quickly we're on 1,000 television channels in 20 countries.
Wonderful.
An audience of a potential audience of 50 million people. So just tremendous. We fed all our audiences, whether they were radio or television, to one website, which was the word hope in Spanish. And so we pointed them there. You only have one hope, and that hope is Jesus Christ. Find him here. And so I had to hire someone full-time just in follow-up, because our goal is we're a bridge. We're a bridge from their home to the local church. So they contact us. We're communicating to them. Absolutely. They might have been, and we've had many accept Christ via email with us.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, we need them in a local church to be discipled and grow in their faith. And so when we have their information now, we communicate that to a local church. Even if we don't have a local Nazarene church in that community, we're connecting them to a local church that we are in line with.
We've covered a lot of ground with Brian, but we are going to close this episode today and pick it back up tomorrow. We hope you've enjoyed this episode and that you will like and subscribe, share us with a friend, and help spread the word. As always, you can reach out to us by emailing podcast@shepnaz.org. Look for Shepherd Church on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can find all those links on the church website at shepnaz.org. For Brian, I'm Joe. Have a great day. This podcast is a production of the Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, Gahanna, Ohio. Email to podcast@shepnaz.org and let us know what you think.